Good morning to all of you. Welcome back. Welcome back to the Namaste experience on this beautiful Monday morning. So good to see all of you. So I have a question that I want to start with. It's not a riddle, but it kind of feels a bit like a riddle. So here's the question. Was there ever a time when time wasn't real?
Even now.
Was there ever a time in which time wasn't real? It's like a little bit of a dance or a wrestling match. You can get in there and you can wrestle with that statement. What is that really trying to say? Well, first of all, that time is not real. And there was never a time, because you can't make it real within the unreal. It's either real or it's not real. So there was never a time in which time was not real. There is only reality. There is only the real, which is what? Timeless. Has no relationship to time. And this is what we're going to talk about today. This is the non-dual experience of timelessness. Now, we seem to find ourselves here in a moment. We seem to find ourselves here in time. But is that so? It certainly seems so. I have a body, or this vessel, that seems to get older. And as some of us are already finding out, it comes a certain point where we say, gosh, I'm not as limber as I used to be. I'm changing because time is going on. I'm getting older. But does that make time real? It certainly seems, compared to the vessel or the body that I identify with and believe myself to be, but is that who I really am? Am I as tied to the unreality of time as I believe? And of course, the answer is no, except that you believe. You believe that to be true. And that is why you find yourself here. That is why we are so attached to the body form or the vessel and what seems to change all around us. But in reality, we can step outside of this limitation anytime we want and realize the timelessness of our soul. Today's lesson in A Course in Miracles is probably the most important lesson there is. I am as God created me. Does that have any relation to time? I am as God created me, perfect, whole, and complete, shining in the reflection of God's love. Of course not. That has nothing to do with time. It has to do with now. And there is no time in now. So let me go ahead and I'm going to bring something up on the screen and we'll wrestle with that for a little bit. So I'll read along or I'll read and you read along. This is called the Big Bang Theory of Non-Duality. The Big Bang Theory of Non-Duality. All right, here we go. You've been told that life in the universe began with the Big Bang. The truth is, the dream of death began with the Big Bang, because before that, the concept of a beginning that leads to an end didn't exist. The beginning that leads to an end. Did you hear that? The idea that there was a beginning that would ultimately lead to an end. Now, that beginning that leads to an end can be about a half a second, or it can be a trillion years. But it's still a beginning that leads to an end. And even though one of them seems like a short period of time, and the other one seems like a very long period of time, that doesn't solve the problem. It doesn't answer the question, is time real? Or is it something that is made up and began with this thing that we look for something outside of ourselves to attach the beginning and ultimately the end of time. So we say, well, the Big Bang. Time began with the Big Bang. And before that, there was no beginning that led to an end. There was only right now. Okay. When suns and planets began spinning around each other in predictable patterns and speeds, measurement within limitation became acceptable. So what we're saying here is that before there were planets spinning around suns, which is how we what? Measure time. We measure time in this situation by how long it takes for the planet to, say, turn around, to rotate, and to spin around the sun. But if it was not moving, would there be time? Would time exist if this planet that we find ourselves in didn't spin, didn't rotate, didn't do any of these things? It's an interesting question when you think about it. At the very least, it begs the question, what is time? So another example would be if you lived on another planet where, say, it took 18 Earth years to spin around that particular sun, is time the same on that planet as it is in this planet? Well, then, no. So in other words, time is dependent, not independent. Or maybe time is independent and not dependent. Or maybe both. I don't know. All I know is that time is not what we say it is. And all time is self-referenced. Time is, it always comes back to how many more years do I have? Which we're going to come to in a moment. All right. When suns and planets began spinning around each other in predictable patterns and speeds, measurements within limitation became acceptable. Do you realize that time was not acceptable until then? Time was not acceptable before that. There was never a before eternity. Remember, before the Big Bang, there was only the eternal because there were no planets spinning around each other. But what this is saying is there was never a before eternity. Think about that for a moment. Eternity is what it is because it has no beginning or end. In other words, it's not a very, 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 very long time. That's the way I used to think about it when I was a kid. I used to try to understand eternity in my mind, and I would keep saying, no, further than that, further than that, further than that, further than that. But I could never get there because I was trying to measure eternity within time rather than realizing that eternity has nothing to do with time. It's not a long, 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 long time. Okay. Eternity is what it is because it has no beginning or end. It also doesn't change just because planets spinning around each other, creating what? Hold on, let me go back. It also doesn't change just because planets spinning around each other, creating what seems like time. Your eternal nature is as sure as God's. That's what the lesson means. I am as God created me. Your eternal nature is as secure as God's eternal nature, but you still refuse to believe that on some level. It may just be that last tiny percentage, but on some level, you still refuse to believe that. You reference your body and the amount of time that you have left on this planet as if it defines you, as if it defines who you are. How much time do you have? Here's a good question. If you have the ability to travel into the future and actually see the day that your body dies, you'd come back to this moment and you'd say, yay, I have 15 years left. Or maybe I have 20 or 2. Uh-oh, I have 2 years left. I better get going. That'd probably be the first thing you think. Shit, I don't have much time left. Much time. But there's really no difference between 15 or 20 or 2. And when you step outside the ego's need to identify yourself, when you step outside the ego's need to identify yourself as anything other than eternal, your need to define yourself is the only thing keeping you from experiencing what? The definition that God has. Your need to define yourself by your body, by the identity, by time, how much time something is going to take, how much time you have left, any of those silly ideas. That's the only thing keeping you from experiencing the definition that God has of you, that you are holy, that you are perfect, that you are complete right here and now. So, am I saying that the Big Bang is happening right now? Of course it is. The instant you realize that, you'll realize your mind, you'll release your mind of the tension. There is a tension within your mind that keeps it moving through time and space as if it's your home. This is important to get. There is a tension within your mind that you keep trying to hold together. Keep that tension going because you're too afraid of what might happen if you let it go. And that tension that you hold in your mind is the only thing that keeps you locked in time and space. Eternity is your home, and anything that happens in an eternal space is happening right now. Do we get that? It's happening right now, or it's not happening. A whole mind, which is what you're coming into now, is simply someone who stops trying to hold everything together instead of just letting it expand exponentially. People always ask, well, what is an enlightened or a whole mind? It's a mind that never pulls back in, but only expands in every direction all the time. And in doing so, includes everything in all directions every time. Instead of trying to maintain that tension in the mind that says, uh-oh, I better hold on to this. I better hold on to that. I better not give myself totally to this because, oh, shit, what might happen? Shit might happen. That's what might happen. Okay, before I go too far. The answer, okay, let me back up here. A split mind asks, this is the opposite. Who will I be if I keep expanding in every direction? Who will I be? And the answer is everything. Everywhere, everyone. I'll be everything. You'll be everything at once, which is what you've been calling the non-dual experience. That's what the non-dual experience is. But now you're asking how to do it. How do I let go of my need to hold my attack thoughts together instead of letting them dissolve or expand? How do I do it? And here's the answer. You don't. You don't. You trying to do anything, and I literally mean anything, is your only problem because the you that you've defined as you isn't real. Because the you that you've defined as real is contained within an unreal, imagined space we call time. And it's not real. Because anything that's happening is happening right now. So it's nothing more than a collection of past references that you take as real. That's what you hold in your mind, past references, past ideas, past concepts that you believe define your reality. That sounds very insulting at first. The idea that the you think you are is nothing more than a collection of unreal thoughts. But that's what you are. I promise you that it does get very joyful very fast if you just relax into heaven. Let it expand. Let it go. You know, one simple way to do that, and one of the ways I've been practicing that lately, is that if I look at someone and I don't know their name or I can't think of their name, there's usually, for most of us, this immediate attempt to pull it in, pull it back together. What's that person's name? What's that person's name? But what I've been doing and what you might try is, okay, just let it go. Let it expand. It doesn't matter. Just call him dear one. That'll work every time. And there's a freedom, there is an expansiveness in that expansion. Just let it expand in every direction. That's your ticket out of time. So relaxing into heaven is the one thing you haven't tried yet. You've been too afraid to try it, but now you're beginning to realize that there's nothing to be afraid of. Fear is the product of not relaxing into truth, not the other way around. Love is the result of letting go of fear, which is the same as letting go of time, and letting the eternal nature of your true self finally take its place in heaven. I am as God created me. If I remain as God created me, fear has no meaning. Evil is not real, and sickness, pain, and death are nothing but imagined, silly ideas I hold on to with all my might. Let it go, expand in every direction. The Big Bang is happening right now, and so are you. You are happening right now. Not the you that you think you are, but who you truly are. So I think that's a good place to begin. I'm going to let Vicky take it from here and see in which direction she expands. Good morning, Vicky.
Good morning, Brother James. Good morning, everybody. Nice to see everyone. So I love this one. I really love this one. First thing that hits me is, of course, what do we name it? The Big Bang. What did history and time and every writer and every scientist call it? The Big Bang. And that's so male, isn't it? That's so male energy. That's so, I'll do it my way. I'll solve this. I'll get this. I'll do this. It's self-will, right? It's self-will going, self-will run right. What is it? Run wild. It's self-will. If it had been a feminine, it would have been a giving of birth that had defined time and timelessness. But anyway, here we are with the Big Bang, that energy to self-will. So it's so simple. The answer is stop solving our problems. All of us, just stop solving. And the step into that, what we think of as that feminine, is that collapse back into love. And it happens in big things, but really the most important ways I believe it's happening is in the little things. The little things, no different than when you said you can't remember someone's name. Instead of pulling it together, you relax, that there's a oneness that isn't defined in labels and measurements, and relax into that and use the language of relaxing, of joining, of oneness. Dear one, use the language of love. I see you, I love you. So, and then it really made me realize this year, and I've said it here in the room, I've been led to not measure anything, you know, because I was a good counter of things. And but I didn't think of it in this context exactly until I saw this post today. But all the ways, you know, I tend to think efficiency is a valuable thing. And I've learned that efficiency in terms of measurement and time is a way to keep time binding me. I don't want to be bound by it anymore. So instead of measuring everything, I just relax into it. And I'm realizing that is the remedy. The remedy and the end of time is being brought about by our relaxing, I would say relaxing and trusting the energy of wholeness that is already what we know to be what we are, and are coming into the experience of it more directly every single day. That's why the end of time is not any kind of destruction. It's a relaxing and collapsing and trusting into love, into that. That's why the mother, that feminine image is very helpful. This is the end of self-will and the opening to what is already one will, one being, one with all of creation. And that's why when we let it happen in the little things, it's why we all of a sudden feel part of a tree or part of a flower, or we feel at one in the air, because we're not using measurement to separate ourselves off anymore, to protect some limited goal, so some problem-solving situation that we have identified. So I think this was a wonderful post, and it's the directions and the remedy are all contained in resting into the present moment, not have a big bang of self-will, of self-determination, or I'll do it my way, but an open-heartedness. And the more we trust, I'm finding, the more we come into natural certainty, because the fear that was underneath every effort to problem solve anything is being released because we're not holding it in place any longer. So that natural willingness to trust opens us up to that field of being that is what we are, love. And love becomes comfortable for us. We're not afraid of it anymore. We become familiar with it. We become relaxed into it, and we start feeling happy. The first effects are a natural buoyancy, a natural feeling of feeling happy for no external reason, for every reason, that we are cared for, and there's nothing we have to measure that needs to be taken care of, that as we let go, it's what Taoism was saying thousands of years ago. The flow, the Holy Spirit, relax into it, trust it, especially in the little things, but also in the big things, that look like they're life-threatening. If we relax into it, if there's something that needs to be said or done, it will rise effortlessly by grace into our awareness instead of by our striving to hold it together. So, Brother James, I love this post and I love this whole new series. I thank you very much. And I thank all you guys. Have a loving, restful, trusting, certain day that love is real.
Beautiful. I like the image of the feminine giving birth rather than the big bang, so masculine. It's like saying the great orgasm. You know. There it is. The whole world has been created. How male. You know, I'm also reminded of mystics and saints who have undergone this experience either through grace or trauma. You take someone like Francis of Assisi, who underwent this primarily through trauma, by being thrown into a war, by being imprisoned, and everything. The armor begins to dissolve. The armor that's all of our defensiveness, not defenselessness, but defensiveness. Did I say it right? Anyway. And suddenly, like if you ever saw Brother, Sun, Sister, Moon, I think this is very real. There was no distance between him and the flowers. There was no separation between him and the creatures of God. It was all one thing. It was all love itself. It was all love. And that can happen through trauma. It doesn't have to, though. It can happen through grace. That's what we're receiving here. I'm also reminded of, I'm a big fan of REM, and they have a song. We'll see who can tell me the next line. It's the end of the world as we know it. Anyone? And I feel fine. Exactly. And I feel, it's the end of the world as we know it, and I feel fine. Thank you. Total gratitude. The end of the world as we knew it, as that we think we know it, but nothing really ends. Okay, so let's see, Calico, we've got a few more minutes. Let's swing you in here and see if you have anything to add and put a little cherry on top of this sundae.
Well, you know, this is great. The past week I've been spent on just looking at the Last Judgment, and you know, it's interesting because that is the end of time. And the Last Judgment, this is all A Course in Miracles, by the way. There are two aspects of the Last Judgment. One is the one that we have when we came into this world, which is God's judgment. And this brings up some stuff to deal with, because we fear God because somehow the world is going to end in, fire and brimstone. But the reality is God's judgment, and I'm just reading from the last judgment, God's judgment is the gift of the correction he bestowed on all your errors, freeing you from them and all effects they ever seem to have. That's our last judgment. And then in the world, at some point, and I feel like I'm getting close to it, there's the last judgment that we ever have. And it's kind of like that's clearing of the mind. And that's totally doable. And that's when time ends, is when we have our last judgment, when we've forgiven ourselves for these ideas that we can judge anything and have an opinion or change anything. It really is the removal from the world, and that's when time ends for me. It's all for me. I can't do it any other way. So great topic, and it just is kind of fluffing up this whole concept of the last judgment for me, which is a really powerful one right now. Thank you so much.
Yeah, wouldn't that be nice? The last and final judgment we ever make. And suddenly we burst through to where we've always been.
Mm-hmm.
We burst into the heaven that we never left except in our imagination. The experience of that, that's all we're talking about. To be in that experience right now, that's what you really want. That is the result of realizing that I am as God created me. So let's do that. Well, with nothing left else to do at this point, we're just sitting around here and heat. At least some of us, not all of us. We're sitting around wherever we're sitting around. Wonder, what do we do next? Well, let's just let go of time. Let's just release it all and go home. You with me?
Yes.
Okay, then say it with me. Amen, 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 y punto. Thank you, everyone. We love you. Have a beautiful day. We'll see you tomorrow.